The Sikha we will be learning is, look at the Sikha Chelik Chov Beis, the Sikha with the title Behar Bechukosai. But you feel more gered, the Rebbe says, I spoke many times, when Sedres HaMochaboris, those Sedres that we put two together. So the Rebbe explained many times, as von dem was mi ze mechaber in aneip, na ze werden ein Sedre, that from the fact that we put them together and they actually become one Sedre, it's not the pshat we now still have two Sedres, read it in the same Shabbos. They become one Sedre. And how do we see they become one Sedre? And the still Beit Sedres of Blei Shiva Kruyim, both Sedres have 7 aliyahs. In other words, we have every Shabbos 7 aliyahs from one Sedre. And here we have 7 aliyahs from both Sedres together. That shows that it really became one Sedre. Und noch more than that, means Mechaber himself von der erste Sedre und die Aschole von der zweite Sedre in ein aliyah. That we combine the end of one aliyah, the end of the Sedre, and the beginning of the second Sedre into one aliyah. It's not even that we stop by the end of one Sedre and then the next set, beginning of the next set is another aliyah. That's the meaning in Taimon, the Rebbe brings an order to, but we don't do that. And we put them, one aliyah combines both. There's one broch in the beginning and one broch at the end of the aliyah. And in the middle, we have a little bit of the first Sedre, a little bit of the second in one aliyah with the same broch, one broch for both, beginning and the end. All that shows that that's one Sedre. So the Rebbe said, I said many times that when you combine two Sedres and it becomes one Sedre, is a fun muchar that proves that both Sedres have something in common. In the context of the Sedre, they have something in common. But the far can is in Schapiro, and that's why they can become combined, because they really have the same theme. They have some common denominator. So therefore, the Rebbe says, we have to understand what's in the Kudim Shutefes from the Sedres Behar and Bechukosai. What's the common denominator in these two Sedres? The Seder Behar and Bechukosai. So it's a general shayla. The other Rabbi, the Rebbe says on the contrary. He said many times that the name of a Sedre that represents the contents of the Sedre. So here, the first Sedre has the meaning of Behar. The word Behar represents the whole Sedre. The second one, the word Bechukosai represents the whole Sedre. The names Behar and Bechukosai tell us something opposite. They two Sedres, the word Behar and the word Bechukosai, have opposite meanings. The Har of a bar, the word Behar means on a mountain. It means something elevated. A mountain is elevated. What does it mean, Ruchnis, when you say something elevated? Means there is some kind of ego here, some kind of identity, personal identity that you have. So that has a meaning in Aveda. A person sometimes has to feel very broad, we call it, and has to be very strong. Like the Pasuk says, that his heart is elevated in the ways of Hashem. Has to be sometimes, not only sometimes, in order for the Rebbe says, every day it has to be. It says in the beginning of Shulchan Aruch that every day you have to be As Kanomer Gibber Kari, but As Kanomer means you have to have chutzpah like a leopard. Chutzpah means you have to show who you are. You have to have certain action, a certain stubbornness that you have. It shows your ego, so to speak. And every day you have to, that's the beginning of Shulchan Aruch, that every day in the morning you have to wake up to be that way. So the word Behar represents the idea that a person is strong and he's stubborn in Yonim Ruchnium. The Dugma, for instance, when it comes on the soim, it comes to a test, darf sich stellen mit der Starkheit und Ases nicht nispol werden. You have to be strong and you have to have the chutzpah, so to speak, and you have to have the stubbornness not to care. Beisteht im Nesoim, pass the test. That's the meaning of Askanomen. You have to be strong like a leopard. You have to be strong. So the word Behar represents the strength. In Ruchni, that you have to have your Metziah strong to make sure that you should pass the test. When it says it should go in Bechukosai means kiyum fu chukim, that you have to keep the chukim. We all know that there are 3 categories of mitzvahs. Mishpotim, Eidos, and Chukim. Mishpotim are those mitzvahs that have a reason. And if the Torah wouldn't tell us to do the mitzvah, we would do it on our own because they make sense. Eidos are those mitzvahs that if the Torah wouldn't tell us, we wouldn't do it. But after the Torah tells us to do it, they make sense. We understand it. And Chukim are those mitzvahs that we don't understand at all. And the Posik says, Bechukosai telecho. That means you have to keep the chukim. That is verbunden und fordert bittel. That's connected and that requires bittel. Chukim is memekayim, therefore, you keep the mitzvahs chukim because was chukim chakaktik zeire gesarti, this is a lotion that says in Medrash, that I made a chukah, I made a decree, uneilach l'shus l'hara rachel. You have no permission to think about it, to try to get into it, to understand it. Azea derebish gehesen. When you keep chukim, you do it because this is what Hashem commanded. Folgt mit dem tzibur. We listen. We follow the commandment. Chotmer veisen dem tam, even if we don't need the reason, don't know the reason. Or the nochmes is hepech haseichel tam. More than that, it could be sometimes against the seichel and against reasoning. We'll still keep it. And how do you keep it? Because you're bottled to the Eibishter. If you wouldn't have the proper bittul, you wouldn't keep it because it makes no sense. The mitzvahs of a person is the seichel. But if the seichel doesn't understand it, you wouldn't do it. So you only do it because of bittul. So Behar represents when you do mitzvahs with your mitzvahs. Bechukosai means the opposite, that you're doing it without your mitzvahs, your bottle. So how do the two fit together? And we said before that if you put the two seders together, they must fit. And here it seems like the seders themselves, because the names represent this, the meaning of the seders, and they seem to contradict. Let's first, to understand this, let's first bring the explanation in the name of the seder, the first seder, like the meaning Yisrael was Teiri, because the meaning, the way the meaning is, and we know if it's a meaning by Yidden, that's itself Teiri. So the meaning is, we'd call it Behar. That's the name of the seder. The Chur is not moving. First glance, it's not understood. The Ikirat Gosh is doch Lechuri in the word Sinai. The main thing here, when we're talking about this mountain, what mountain are we talking about? Mountain Har Sinai. That's what the Pasuk says. Har Sinai. So we're talking about mountain of Sinai. That means not just a mountain. We're talking about this specific mountain. Der Ausgeteilt der Berg, the specific mountain, welches is gegeben geworden der Torah, which the Torah was given. And that the word Sinai represents the mountain the Torah was given. He says in Torah 11, that the Chazal say in Torah's Kedim, Rashi brings on this pasuk of Behar, Ma Shmita Sinai, just like Shmita was given from Sinai. What does it mean by Matan Torah? But we use the word Sinai. So too, everything else was given from Sinai. The first Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, Moshe kibul Torah Sinai. Moshe accepted the Torah, received the Torah from Sinai. So we see Sinai, that is the thing that we're talking about. When we talk about this mountain, the main thing is the word Sinai. Sinai means the mountain on which the Torah was given. But man gedarft anrufen the Seder mit Name Sinai. So we should have called this Seder with the name Sinai, because that's what we mean here. Oder al Koponim Behar Sinai. At least to call it with both names, Behar Sinai. And he says in Order 12, like the Psadigon and the Rambam refer to this Seder as Har Sinai. We may find by noch Seders, we find by other Seders, as a nominus from Tzvei. Sometimes the Seder is called with two names. And Order 13, for instance, Chayesora, Sabroch, others. So it's not the Pshat. We must have one word. Then you could say, well, so we chose the word Behar. There are Seders that are called with two names, so at least should have been called Har Sinai. We pass the nomen Sinai. How does it fit to just call it, Behar? We pass the nomen Behar. How can we just call it Behar? Though. That doesn't tell us which mountain we're talking about. And the main thing is this specific mountain. So why do we call it Behar? The Shail is noch starker. The question is even stronger if when we talk about the lesson in Avedas Hashem is serving Hashem that one must take out from the word, from the union of Har Sinai. When we understand what the lesson from this mountain is, we'll understand how the word Har doesn't fit seemingly. Chazal sagen, the Chazal tell us that the time was man der Usiklim dem Har Sinai zu geben, Dafke zu geben of him the Torah, why Hashem chose the mountain of Sinai specifically to give the Torah, is weil mochich mekol Torah, because it's lower than all other mountains. The Medrash says that the mountains were arguing. One was a big mountain, said that Hashem should give it on me. And the end was Hashem chose Har Sinai because that's the lowest of all the mountains. It is niedriger von alle Berge, it's lower than all the mountains. But this itself, that it's a mountain that's lower than all the mountains, is a contradiction in itself. On the other hand, on one hand, it shows that you have to be low. You have to hold yourself low. That's the whole idea. This mountain is mochich. Mochich, it's something that's low. It's a low mountain. So we're stressing the fact that it's low. That low shows shiftless. Or we say bittel. Aber von der zweiten Seite say Sinai, ahar. On the other hand, even Sinai is also a mountain. That means a mountain which is sticking out, which is not the union of shiftless. So how do these two things fit together? So the answer is, the pshat is, that even though it's expected of a yid that he should have shiftlus, shiftlus means holding himself low. Feeling yourself low should not be in a way that it makes you what we call a skupa nidreses. It's a lotion in Gemara in native. Skupa nidreses means, as Rashi there says, that people step on you. If you're low, people could step on you. And what happens, as it says there in native, regular ab ikipizoyen. That's an embarrassment. In other words, when you step on something a lot, you take it away completely. You erase it completely. So you shouldn't become, you have to be shofel, you have to be an honor, you have to be humble, etc., but not to become something that you stepped on, chas v'sholem. But zusammen with the shiftlus, there's I nur from take it bisnasas canal. But together with your feeling low, feeling humble, you have to at the same time be strong. When it comes to certain things, you have to be strong. You have to be elevated. Your mitzias should be, your ego should be there for the good sake. That should be. And that's the idea of a low mountain. It has both. It's low, so it shows the union of humility, and at the same time, it's a mountain that shows that you still have to have that aspect of a mountain. Und die zwei Unionen, zwischen den zwei Werte Behar und Sinai, these two Unionen, they are expressed in the two words that the mountain is called. It's called Har, Sinai. Behar weist of his nasa to take it out. The word Behar, which is on the mountain, stresses the mountain aspect of it, shows that you have to be elevated, you have to be strong. Hashem and Sinai allein, but the word Sinai itself, nicht unterstreichen dich dabei, as es redet sich. I'm not mentioning that it's a mountain. The word Sinai doesn't say it's a mountain. So the word Sinai itself, weist auf einen Bittel. That itself shows Bittel. Because Sinai is al Shem Sneh. Sinai also comes from the word Sneh. Sneh is a bush. And that mountain was the mountain on which there was the burning bush by Moshe Rabbeinu. And it says in Medrash, a Sneh is shofel mikol le'ilon shebe'elam. The Sneh, this bush that's called Sneh, is the lowest of all trees. So the word sneh itself shows I'm being low. The word har shows on high. That means the fact that you still have to have this concept of being strong and feeling your ego, so to speak, in the way that it's supposed to. And then the sneh shows the lower. Is the chmuvim. So what this mountain has, these two words. So these two words, each one represents one part of the two lessons that come together. But we understand as from the Tzvei Inyonim, Hagbo and Bittel, that from these two things, that on one hand you have to have the Hagbo, the elevation, the strength, and at the same time the Bittel is the Iker Maila Bittel. Which of the two is the main one? We understand that the main one is the Bittel. Doesn't mean that the main one you have to be strong and you have to this, and you also have to have Bittel. No, there's the other way. The main thing is you have to be bottle, you have to be humble. But the Bible, but at the same time, we tell you, as a stone is ein Bittel, kaskup and the dress durch jeder Fuß, that it shouldn't be so bottle that everybody could step on you. Everyone's foot, even the foot, the lowest of everybody could step on you. Sometimes you have to be strong and you have to be elevated. And actually in Ha'orah 19, the Rebbe says that in Lekutei Torah it says the bittul but the bittul has to be much more than the other side. And then he brings from Shulchan Aruch, the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, takes on the Bes Yosef, that when you have that askanomen, as I said before, it's something you have to have the chutzpah, and you have to have the strength, and you have to have the stubbornness, but you have to be very careful that it shouldn't be too strong, too much that who knows how low it will go. So the bottom line is we see that are the two things that you have to have. The main things you have to have the bittul. Elamai, at the same time, you should remember, don't be so bottled that you will get stepped on and then you won't be able to do what you're supposed to do. Like the Gemara tells us, as a Talmud Chochem, Talmud Chochem has to have a certain measurement, a very low measurement of gaiva, of ego, which is called an eighth of an eighth. There was a cheshbon time at the Gemara, certain measurements and things. So very much from gaiva, you have to have an eighth of gaiva, aber nicht mehr chas v'sholem, not more. So it's a very little amount. So it comes out that the main thing of the two Behar and Sinai, Behar shows on the elevation and the strength, the stubbornness and chutzpah, and the Sinai shows on the bittul. So it comes out that the word Behar itself doesn't show the Iker. The Iker is the bittul. The fact that it has to be a mountain also, that's, your bittul shouldn't be in such a way you shouldn't have any strength. Heinz, wie passt es auch from the Seder mit Nome Behar allein? How does it fit that we call the Seder just the word Behar, which means blaze hagbod, just being the elevated, just being the stubbornness. Unuis laws in the Mikir, and to skip the main thing, which is the Sinai, and that's the bittul. Eine von der Purim is that's one of the explanations like this. The Aveda from bittul shiflus odom, the Aveda of bittul, which is called in Shulchan Aruch also shiflus odom. The Ramah calls it shiflus odom. You have to feel shofel. You have to feel low. The person's lowness, so to speak, is verbunden mit Gadol Sakel. Shulchan Aruch mentions both together. A person has to, before you daven, it says in Shulchan Aruch and Ramah, you have to think about shiflas odom v'Gadol Sakel, how low the person is and how great Hashem is. So it's not two separate things. The Rebbe says here, they're connected. The shifla sodom, the fact you have to remember how low you are, is because Gadol Sakel, because the Eibishter is big. Not you, the Eibishter is big. And why are you low? Why do you feel low? Because you recognize truthfully that the Eibishter is the real Metzias, the Eibishter is real. And it's bottled by your field as the emes Metzias for Naltzis Lakus. Why are you bottled? Because you feel Gadol Sakel every single Lakus. So the bittul comes as a result of you being bottled to Lakus, realizing that everything is a Lakus. And the Rebbe comes out with a big chiddush. And therefore, is that emeser bittul, when is a person really considered completely bottled? Then the heder metzias, if as they feel, when you're not feeling your own metzias, your own being, your own ego, bisma filta feeling that as me is bottled. You don't even feel that you're bottled. Since the bittul comes from the understanding of the greatness of Hashem. And what's the greatness of Hashem? That there is nothing but Hashem. So you are bottled because there's nothing but Hashem. In a case like that, when are you really bottled? We don't even feel. Your Metzias doesn't exist at all. Only Hashem, that you don't even feel that you're bottled. The fact that you feel that you are mevatel yourself, the fact that you feel that you're bottled, is abavais shows as is noch da Metzias without bottle when there's still some Metzias in you that has to be bottled. I am mevatel myself, so there is an I who is mevatel myself. So there is still a Metzias. When you hold by bittul amiti, when you're holding by the real bittul, is a nit marigish filled case ach lukus. You don't feel anything besides the lukus. So you don't feel yourself that you're up. You don't even feel that you're bottled. Forget it's possible that when it comes to an opinion like that, you're so bottled that you could say things that looks like gaiva, because it's not your gaiva. It's not you. There's nothing but you. So you don't even feel that you're bottled and you have to be bottled yourself. This mirrors itself. It's reflected in halacha in nigla. But in Geret Amal Baruch, as I spoke once before at length, in the mechilek between an eved and a shliach, the difference between an eved, a slave of somebody, and we know whatever the slave is only a representation of the master, and as we'll see in a second, as chotshluch, and the shliach is also a representation of represents the mishaleach, the one that sent me. But the difference is like this: as chotshluch is lodim kamese, even though the din is a shliach of a person, a representative, an agent of a person, is like the person who sent him. But this includes and this includes very high madrega. There are a few ways that the Rebbe will explain what it means that the shliach becomes like the mishalei, like the one that sent him. And the highest level is that the shliach, as one is doing his mission that he's doing, he becomes like the Mishaleach. And the Rebbe explains, we know as in Shlichus and the Fran Drayafanim, there are three ways to explain Shlichus, which means there are three levels of being a Shliach. Number one, the Mishaleach git reshus vekeach sem Shliach to tondi pulabim kaimei. The Mishaleach, the one that sends him, gives permission and gives the authority and the right to the agent to do the act in his place. But what is done is the Shliach. In other words, we're not saying the Mishaleach did it. Reuven sends Shimon to do something. And when Shimon does it, it works for Reuven, but not because Shimon became Reuven. Shimon is Shimon, and whatever happened here, Shimon did it. But this is a halacha that if he appointed him a shliach, what Shimon did and Shimon did it, will work for Reuven. The other way is the other way is that the act that Shimon did is considered as if Reuven did it. The first way, it's not like Reuven did it. Reuven didn't do it. Shimon did it, but it works for Reuven. The second way is that the act, because he made him to a shliach, so the act that Shimon did is as if Reuven did it. As haste asiyas hamashaleach dur dem shliach. It's called it the mashaleach, the sender. It's as if he did it through the shliach. And the higher way, the third way is as neat nor the asiyas ashliach was ein keich hamaisis and the mesiachas mashaleach. Not only what the shliach did and his action is referred to and is considered that the mashaleach did it. Nor shliach gufa v'ed mitziyas hamashaleach. The shliach himself becomes the mashaleach. In this scene, the shliach becomes the mashaleach. So when we say Reuven sends Shimon to a certain shlichus, but Shimon does it. Not only we say the act was done by Reuven. Reuven did it. It's not only it relates to Reuven. Reuven, the Shimon became Reuven that in this act. So that so shows how the connection between the shliach to the meshliach is very close. He still could separate between the two. There's still two people. But the far zogt men shluch odem kemeisen nor b'shaychas minyan hashlichas. That's why the shliach becomes the meshliach even in the higher level. Only concerning this act in which he became a shliach. But not other things. Even at the same moment, he doesn't become in everything else a meshaliach. There's still him. Elamai, in this inyan, he becomes the meshaliach. So it's still a he. Ashenken, I never did metzias b'fnei atzmi klal. There's no metzias for himself at all. Kol metzias is metzias. His whole being is the being of the master. And the far, therefore, there is a the din is mashekona evet also the rebed hot kona rabbi. Whatever the slave owns and whatever he acquires it for the master. And here in the Torah 27, the Rebbe quotes what he writes in Torah 29, and he quotes the Rashba that by an Eved, it's not only that whatever the Eved acquires, it becomes his, and whatever is his goes from him to the master. When he acquires it, he is like the hand of the master. That's what the Rashba says. So that shows that he is no mitzias for himself at all. While a shliach is a mitzias b'fnei atzmi. A shliach is still an entity for himself. That he is mevatel himself. He nullifies himself to the meshaleach. So therefore, even while he's a shliach and he is being mevatel, he's nullified to the meshaleach. Leib not for sein mitzias. There is still a place for his mitzias. That could happen. His mitzias. And the Rebbe in Order 28 says, that's why there's a din that the shliach, in order to become a shliach, has to have a similarity to the meshaleach. For instance, a din, a goy can't be a shliach. A shaita, one that's not normal, or a cotton, a child, can be a shliach because he doesn't have a similarity to a shliach. So his mitzias counts. He has to be a certain level of mitzvah that he could be nullified to the meshaleach. So there is a he who is nullified. So even though he becomes one with the meshaleach, but still there is a mitzvah of him. An eved, a slave, doesn't have to nullify himself to his master. A slave, we're talking about the type of slaves that were in the olden times. He was property of the master. He's not a mitzias for himself. It's not that he's bottled to the master. His mitzias is the mitzias of his master. If one is verstanden, from that we understand as when someone is holding the real level of bittul to lakus is as nit considered to take a hagbah. It's no contradiction at all to being strong and being stubborn and being elevated in your things that you feel that you have to do for Leibishter. Well, Sanida take a hagbah from sein mitzias because even though it's elevated and you have your ego, it's not your ego. It's not the ego of your mitzias. Nor the take of agof and the kus, it's the strength of the kus. You are so bottled that you don't feel yourself as an entity for yourself. You don't even feel that you're bottled because there's nothing but elikus. So when you are strong and you feel elevated, so to speak, it's not extended to bittul verkehrt. It comes because you are so bottled. You can be elevated because you're bottled to the Eibishter, and everything that you do is only from the Eibishter. Well, derech maimer Chazal, like the Chazal say, it's an Eved. It says the Chazal say, the Rabban Chachamim say concerning a slave, Eved melech melech. The slave of a melech is a melech. Now, on one hand, you might say, oh, the slave of a melech feels like a melech. That means he's big balgaive. He thinks he's something special. No, but the schafft nicht dem Gefühl von Yeshet zum Gaive beim Eved. This doesn't cause a feeling of ego and Gaive by the Eved. But this is not sein chshivas regardless, nor the melech. It's not his chshivas, it's the melech's chshivas. So when he thinks of himself in being an Eved, he thinks of himself as a melech, yeah, because he's an extension of the melech. That's all he is. So it's not his mitzvah. It's not Yeshes and Gaive. And the Rebbe here in Order 30 says, it's connected to Lag Beimer, that Reb Shimon Yochai in Zohar said, Ano Simona Ba'alma. I'm only a simon. I'm only a sign to the Eibishter. In other words, he said he was so bottled to the Eibishter that he only represents the fact that the Eibishter made him. And he's an extension, so to speak, of the Messias of the Eibishter. And therefore, his gaiva is not a gaiva. I don't know if the Rebbe brings it later in the order, but we find another statement of Reb Shimon ben Yochai, that Reb Shimon ben Yochai said that there are two great people in the world, me and my son. We're the greatest. And if you're going to say there's only one that's the greatest, it's me. The question is, wow, how could you say that? How could you say that? How could that person of Shimon Khan himself say he's the greatest person in the world? If you're not really 100% bottled, yes, that's Gaive. I recognize that I'm the greatest. But if he's so bottled today, he could be a Baal Gaive because it's not his Gaive. When he said, I'm the greatest person because of the truth, I use a marshal sometimes. I don't know if it's a good marshal or not. When you have little children come from kindergarten and the kid is the best kid in the class, and you ask the kid, who's the best in the class? He'll say, I am. You get a little older, you don't say it because you're embarrassed to say, even though it's true. But little kids, it's the tmimis. It comes from your so simple simplicity. Yeah, that's the truth. That's the truth. I'm the best, but not because it's an ego thing. Here it's even more. Your Messias is nothing but the Eibishter, and therefore you could say I'm the greatest person because it's not me. You're so bottled that you don't even feel. If you start feeling that I am bottled, then you would say, well, can I say this or can't I say it? But if you're completely bottled, that's why it says also that Reb Shimon Yochai said, when it says he should go visit Hashem, I don't know if Rabbi brings it in the orders, he said, Mam pnei ha'odin Hashem, dor Hashem Yochai. Who's Hashem, so to speak, that Reb Shimon Yochai? What does that mean? I mean, people ask, how could Shimon Yochai say he's Hashem? It didn't mean Chas v'sholom, he's Hashem, he's the creator. He's no Metzias for himself. So he's able to say it. My whole Metzias is nothing. I'm nothing. There's nothing but Hashem. That's what I feel. That's why he's able to say, I'm only a Simen Ba'alme. And the far, Verdi said that ongeruf mit nome Behar allein. That's why the Seder is called Behar. Now we said Behar is a problem. Behar shows you're elevated. That's the opposite of Bittel. So he says, no, the Behar here is not the opposite of Bittel. While the Shleimus from Bittel is the completion, the perfect Bittel is a Zayin de Gahar, that while you're a mountain, das heißt means when the statement that take it back, I'm standing with the elevation and with strength, darf man gar nicht bavoren, and then as do is dorchus I take it, you don't even have to mention that the strength is a holy strength. We need kenegen yeshes, chas v'sholem, not your own ego. He's a zeifel bottle to lekus, as in yikorin talking kesal ketayt as I metzias. It's so bottled to the Eibishter that there's not even a thought that maybe this shows on your metzias. The mela darf man nicht sagen befeirish as es har was kommt weil mis naifen von Sinai. That's why you don't have to even mention the word Sinai. In other words, the question of the Rebbe was, Behar shows the opposite of what you're trying to show. The main thing is the bittul. So how does Har, which doesn't mention the bittul at all, it mentions the elevation. Why would he say that? The answer is, the real bittul is when you say, you don't even have to mention that you're Sinai. Sinai represents bittul. Because the main thing is that your Metzias is not your own Metzias. So you're bottled to the course, and then you could be a Har, because your strength is a strength and the stubbornness of whatever of the Eibishter. And this is the explanation when we use this for our Aveda in spirituality. From the many ways you could describe Har Sinai, which means that the Rebbe will say there are three ways we could describe Har Sinai. Sometimes we find that we call it Sinai, just the word Sinai. Sometimes we call it Har Sinai. It's another way to describe. And sometimes we call it Har, just the word Har. And these are three levels in the Bittul to the Eibush. And the Rebbe explains it. When you start serving Hashem, that means Ametzias Lasme, and you start off, you're still a Metzias, that's nature, you're still Metzias, and you got to be Mevatel yourself. So when you start, Darvzain Sinai Elaine, then you have to have just Sinai. Sinai represents the humility, the Bittul. Es ken nit sein kein Inyan von Har bei. You don't even mention Har, because you can't have any Har which represent elevation on your Metzias, because you're still in the beginning. And if you start with your Metzias means your Metzias. Nor man nit the Bittul alone. There, at the beginning, you have to stress just the Bittul. You have to work on Bittul. Since you are a Metzias for yourself, is noch nit shaykh so der Aveda the take about the Kedusha. You're not shaykh yet to this concept of being strong and stubborn and everything, and that should be itself Kedusha. Because if you're in that lower level, if you start being strong and you start being with your ego, it'll be an ego of your Metzias, the opposite of humility. It'll be a real ego. So you got to stay away from that. So then we just stay just Sinai. That's the way the word Sinai itself is. The Rebbe said, you give an example that Eshterei from the Shlichus, the first way of Shlichus, as we said before. The Shlichus a Metzias Latzme. First way is he's a Metzias for himself. And he remains a Metzias himself. But he's Mavatal, and he, who is his own Metzias, is doing something for the one that sent him. So here, you're still a full-fledged Metzias, and that's why the Aveda is Sinai, work on Bittul. A Hecher Reifan is Har Sinai. The higher level is saying the mountain of Sinai, which is The Rodam Ha'evet ken shen hob ma gefühl von Har. The person who's serving Hashem could already start having the concept of Har, which means the concept of feeling elevated. Because he's already at the level where he worked on himself and he reached the level of bittul, an inner bittul. That when he becomes strong, already the strength is not his own personal strength, is the strength of the kus because he became bottled to the kus. He still has to be called Sinai. Sinai means the bittul. You have to make sure that you have this bittul. Which will save him, protect him for falling into real ego. Because even though he's already by the level of Sinai, but it didn't penetrate into his whole being. He's still a level that he feels that he is nullifying himself to Hashem. So there's still a he, whatever he is. So you got to be very careful. So you got to have the har. You're able to have the har already because your mitzias already could be that your strength is a strength of ruchnis of the Eibishter, but you got to keep in mind the Sinai. Like the higher level of shlich, the other second and third level, as a git ibers and keich that he gives over his maise to the mishaleach. The second level is that whatever he does is as if the mishaleach did. He gave it over. So it's considered that whatever he does is the mishaleach did it, the one he's bottled to. Or the third level, the shliach becomes the mishaleach. So this is a level where he's already bottled to the Mashaleach. We still could separate. There's still two. Like I said, even the third level, it's not like an Evid. But even the third level, there is you're still whoever you are. Elamai, in this Inyan, you're like the Mashaleach, you give his over, but there's still somebody who's mevatel himself to the Mashaleach. And the same thing here also. When it comes to the word Har Sinai, you're already able to be Har because you're already bottled. But you got to constantly keep in mind that you are mevatel yourself to stay away. Be careful; it shouldn't turn into your own ego. The hersterefen is the highest level is Behar Alein, just the word Behar. The bittel is bishleimus bizas madarfni dermonen and bavoren nasi Sinai. He's so much bottled, complete bottle. He's the full 100% bottle that you don't even have to remind him and make sure to have the word Sinai. Says me talking orton afila kasalkadaitach can under mitzias Israel lakus. There's no havamina means there's no even thought there is something else but the Eibishter that you have to tell him. Remember that you have to be bottled to the Eibishter. So he could be completely looks if someone outside doesn't see him might think he's a balgaive, but forget he's so bottled that he could say it because there's no mitzias of his own. So his own mitzias, so whatever good he says about himself, so to speak, is all because there's nothing. He's not really him. It's all bottled to the Eibishter. So after saying all this, we're talking about a very, very high madrege. Imagine the madrege that you're so bottled that you don't even realize that you're bottled. You don't feel that you're bottled. And the Rebbe stressed it before the word gefil, because the moment you feel, like by a person, doesn't say it, but like a person's his body, you don't feel your body. You don't feel your hand. If you touch, you feel a hand, but you don't feel. The moment a person starts feeling a certain limb in his body, there's something wrong with it. Even in one place the Rebbe writes, that what's a headache? What's a headache? A headache means you feel your head like this. I don't feel my head. It's me. But if I start feeling the entity of my head, that's a headache. Or somebody hurt something. What does hurt mean? I start feeling that part. And to the Eibishter to be bottled so much is a real, real high madrege. So the Rebbe continues. From Behar is even though this level of Behar itself is a very high madrege in bittul. He says, nevertheless, it's a lesson for every yid in his aveda. Because be'emes, essentially, everyone has that bittul. The lashon that it says in Tikkun Zayar, in Gemara, it says, "Kol Yisrael b'nei melochim." All yidden are like a prince, children of a king. In Zayar, in Tikkun Zayar, it says they are kings. So we are like an Eved melech, which is the highest madrege. So everyone could reach to a certain degree, have that concept in him, the level of har, when you know Metzias whatsoever, and B'meila you could have the har, and still it's no contradiction to the beat. When you expect of a yid, demand of a yid, he should be strong in the union of Yiddishkeit. Meint es nicht am Mefarbek chas v'sholom of sein Bittel. It doesn't mean one might think that what happens here, this is the opposite of bittul. Nevertheless, because it comes to Yiddishkeit, you have to overlook the fact that you're supposed to be bottled. Sometimes you come to a point that something bad, you could do something bad, and you nevertheless have to become like a Balgaiva, strong and stubborn. And stubborn, even though we're saying stubbornness is no good, being strong is no good. But in this case, Nebuch, there's no other way you could overcome the test that you have. So you have to remember that's not pshat. No, the starkheit gufa is bepnimius that take on nefesh lekis. The pnimi is really deep down. The fact that you're strong to do something that the Eibishter wants, even though it sounds like gaiva, elamai, you have to use gaiva because there is no choice. No, really, this is a take of the strength of the neshama. Was is a chelik and lekam imal mamish. It says in Tanya that neshama is a chelik of the Eibishter from above. Mamish exactly. So already it has that, and therefore Ayid is able to have the take. Ayid Arvis, Ayid has to know. Adi neshama for Ayidin, that the neshama by Ayid, and he's going to quote what the Friedrich Rebbe said, as it's written in the Likutei Diburim and in the Sefer Morning Top Zion, when he was taken out of jail and he was sent to exile to Kostroma, the train station, when he was going to Kostroma, this is what he said. Ayid has to remember that a neshama v'yid hot man in Golos nit vertrieben und Yeshibas Malchus in Tibrigem. It wasn't chased away in Golos and it wasn't given over to the control of the nations. Und was is in the Gehe to Torah, Mitzvah and Hagi Yisrael, and anything that has to do with Torah and mitzvahs and Jewish customs, haben wir Yidden of sich nit kan der Sorger. We Yidden have nobody who could give us his opinion. No one's going to tell us what to do when it comes to this, because we have a neshama, and the neshama is beyond that. And the Rebbe continues, Dina de Malchus Dimet, true. The laws of the country are laws. Unaltisgara Bekekotman says, don't start up with the Goyim, even if it's a small nation, certainly a big nation. So that's true. Aber wenn es kommt zu einer Linie von Yiddishkeit, Dina Malchus Dina, that the laws of the country is a law, that's not if it's against Yiddishkeit. That's if there's a laws, you got to follow the laws. And you got to be nice with the Goyim, don't start up with them. But if it comes to a union of Yiddishkeit, that Yiddishkeit is in danger, is that a nevet melech melech, and every Yid is like a melech. A melech has no one control over him. A melech is the boss. Every Yid is the boss. The male is other. On the contrary, nit no was hodem take it from a melech. So not only that he has the strength of a king, nor noch mehr torgo nit meichel sein al kvede. You're not allowed to. The din by a king is not allowed to be meichel, to forgive on his covet. There's a din you have to give honor to the king, respect to the king. So other people that you have to give respect, they have a right to be meichel. Said, I don't care, I give up. You don't have to have respect, and then you don't have to. But by a king, it says he's not allowed to. So if we have a din of a king, we can't forego our covet. Val says nicht sein covet, nor says covet amalchut. By the king, why can't he forgive of his covet? Because when you give covet to the king, it's not the covet of this individual, the covet of the Eibishter, covet for melech malcham lochem hakadosh baruch hu, covet of the Eibishter, and that's why when it comes to Yiddishkeit, you can't forego and overlook that. Why? Because you're a king. And what pshat you're a king, the king means the melech malcham lochem hakadosh baruch hu, the Eibishter, and then you can't overlook that. I rest amongst them, and the Rebbe order says that what we mean here is the famous Maimer Chazal. David said, "Make for me a mikdash, I will rest in them." Should have said, "B'seichei, I will rest in it." So it means b'kolechat v'echad. David rests in every single yid, which is nafshei halekis v'elchis chelik elakal mamish. It means his neshama is a nefesh halekis, which is a chelik part of the Eibishter himself. Chelik mina etzem is a part of the etzem. And b'meila, what we said before, that there is a level of bittul so much that there's no other mitzias. That applies to every yid. Now, by tzaddikim, they actually feel it physically. By simple people, we don't feel it, but we have to keep in mind that this is what it really is. That it's really the takeif haneshama that's there, and b'meila, there's no way you could give into this when it comes to something of Yiddishkeit. Apikol and alvat mech verstehen dem kesher from Behar and Bechukosai. Now we'll explain the question we asked in the beginning. The question was, how do we put the two names together? Behar shows him on Gaives, on Metzias, being elevated, ego. Bechukosai shows our chukim. Chukim is something that you do only through bittul. These are two opposite tnuas, two opposite ways. Now we'll understand. The zweit nuas in Aveda was werden herausgebracht in the Nemen Behar. The two ways, the two directions in Avodas Hashem, which are expressed in the two names, Behar, which is Tekev and Isnases, strength, and elevation. Bechukosai, which represents bittul, they're not a contradiction, like we thought in the beginning. Nor adarab, on the contrary, one is a result of the other. How? We get fear, as we said before, is a take these nasas gemeint mit Behar at itself and bittul amiti. That Behar represents that you're strong and you have this elevation is a result of the true bittul. It's a result of the real bittul, that there is not even a thought, a possibility of being different. There's no doubt that the Eved is what the master is. So the inyan of Behar comes as a result of the bittul. Und dit nur vom bittul wird gebracht in Bechukosai, in dem Kiyam mitzvahs and Eifen Fuchukim. And this is brought out in the word Bechukosai by keeping the mitzvahs of Bechukosai, which is the mitzvah Chukim. So first of all, the Rebbe doesn't express it right here, but it's self-understood. Chukim, we said in the beginning, represents bittul. Because Chukim are mitzvahs that you do not because you understand, you do it because you're bottled. So right away we see there's no contradiction. Bahar, if you're really Bechukosai, if you're really bottled, then you'll be able to have Bahar. You can have the Gaiva, which is not really Gaiva. But the Rebbe adds another word to it. The Alter Rebbe is Mavayed. The Alter Rebbe explains that Bechukosai is the word Bechukosai doesn't only mean laws in the category of Chukim, but it also means carved out. What's the meaning of carved out? The roof of Nesis Achkike besteht in them. The specialty of words which are carved out in a stone means was nicht blazan in the ACS forensic mit der Sache, welches it's not only are the letters that are carved out connected to the stone in which it's carved out, but die Meile is veranderlich bei ACS Aksive. This is there also in words that you wrote. When you add ink to the paper or to the parchment, now the words are on top of the parchment. So they're connected to the parchment. But by carved out letters is much more. Nor as the ace is eine Gorke Metzies nicht versichert. There's no separate entity of words, of letters. So your ganze Metzies is nor die Sachen, welches eine Nutzigkeit. Their whole being is only the stone. The letters are the stone themselves. Bedugmas with the ganze Metzies from the Mos Aleph, from the Luchas Heaven. Just like, gives an example by the Luchas. Luchas, the words were carved out. So he gives an example of the first letter of the words carved out in the Luchas, which is the Aleph of Anoich Hashem Lekecho. What was that Aleph? Is given der Even from the Luchas. That Aleph was the stone. The stone was in the shape of an Aleph. It had an Aleph in it, but it was not something added to it. Well, das is der Diuk in dem Nomen Chukim. And that's the exact meaning of the word Chukim. That something in the word Chukim, more even than the word Gzeira. Gzeira means a decree, which you could say the same thing. A decree means this is what I decree, too bad, whether you understand it or not, you have to do it. But the word Chukia has, besides the fact that this means a mitzvah that you don't understand and you have to do it because you have to do it, just like that, the word Chukim has something extra. Gzeira meant that the kiyum for the mitzvah is when you say a decree, you do it no matter what, but you do it because you force yourself to do it. You have to break yourself and do something that has no reason. That's like a decree. We're decreeing you must do it, so you're breaking yourself. Chukah, but the word chukah, which also has the meaning of carved out, that shows us that when you do these mitzvahs, you don't even force yourself. The Rodam is bottled betachas from the Meibrishin. The person is so bottled to completely to Meibrishin, Hashem, when he did metzias la'atzme, and he's on the metzias for himself. The aces achukis in the heaven tape, just like words which are carved out in a stone, in the precious stone or whatever, you carve it out. The whole metzias of the word is the stone. Automatically you do what Eibishter wants. When you use the word Gzeira, it means I do what Eibishter wants, even though it doesn't make sense, but I have to force myself. It's a decree. Chukah means you're so bottled, automatically you will do it. Why? Because Eibishter, and that's all. Your home is nothing but Eibishter. You feel Eibishter, and that's what Eibishter wants, automatically you do it. But those say the deal Loshen Chazal, that's the reason for the Chazal when they say that when you tells us how to do the chukim, the lashon is Eilach Reshus Laharach. As he called it before, Gzeira Gazati Chukati, Eilach Reshus Laharach. You have no permission to think after it, to think about it. So the Rebbe asks, L'chure, what Gedarf Stein ve'alt Hararach. I should have said, and don't think about it. What does it mean you don't have Reshus to think about it? It doesn't say don't think about it. So the Rebbe is going to explain like this. What he's trying to say, don't think about it, doesn't mean, because when you say the word don't think about it, you could mean It's telling you what to do. Normally, you want to think about things. Now we're telling you, don't opposite. Force yourself and don't think about it. That's what we mean. If it would say, Al Tahar, don't think. Normally a person thinks, don't do it. Here is trying to say, Einach Rishus, as if saying, as we read it inside in a moment, you have no permission to think. Not that you fighting your seichel. You have to think as much you want. In this case, there's nothing that you will do. The Loshen is no permission, but there's nothing that you will do that you will have to fight your seichel. And the Rebbe says it like this. The Shleimer the beer is that the reason why it says the word Ein Rishus, it doesn't say don't think about it, is like this. Ein Rishus la'aracher, you have no permission to think after it, for it, is Madish shows, when it says you don't have permission to think, means that be'emes you should think. Normally you have to think. Together with the nase, Tavzain nishma, you have to have nishma. Nase means I will do, without understanding. Nishma means I will understand. So the first thing has to be nase. You have to accept it, no question about it. But we tell you that afterwards you should think. And that's what it says here. You be maharer. You should think. You have to want to search into the reasons for the mitzvahs. Nor in them minyan and in this case, you have no permission. But what does that mean? That means that you have no permission to think. Du hast seichel. You have seichel. Und du darfst es nutzen, and you have to use your seichel. But in dem Zug mitzvahs hat man nicht gegeben, here the Torah didn't give you permission to think. Now, what it means deeper, it doesn't say these words, but it means it's as if automatically you won't think. Not the pshat, you don't think. Sitracht sich nicht. It's in Yiddish as a word, sitracht. There's something you don't think about. You don't think with your seichel against it. You're using your seichel. But you should use your seichel. And the fact that you're not using your seichel is not a problem, that you have to force yourself. You have no reshus for it. In other words, it's not, I'm saying extra words, doesn't say in the sikha, but it's not in your reshus. It's not in your domain. Reshus also means domain. It's not in your domain. If you're completely bottled to the Eibishter, that's what we're saying. Your chuki means that you're completely bottled. It's like letters carved out in the stone. It's a different domain. So the thinking, the fact that you're not going to understand it is not because you will not understand it. It's not in your reshus. It's not part of you because you're in a different level. You're in a different domain. You're in the domain of the Eibishter. And the Rebbe adds even more. When they in them is Meshel nor Laharer. And in that, we're also, what are we trying to exclude? The word Laharer. Doesn't say Lachshev. Could have said, and don't think about it. Or even Reshus. Ein lach Reshus Lachshev. You have no Reshus to think. It says even more. The word Maharer is used usually when, as the Rebbe will say, when you're questioning something. Let's read inside. Ki machukim darf nicht sein in Eifen, that when you do the chukim, shouldn't be in a way, was is sheile linyan aseichel, haizbonenes, v'hadrisha b'ashayla, which excludes, which negates the logic and contemplation and searching and questioning. That's not how you do chukim. That's how it would seem, that you don't think and don't question and don't do this. Nor adarab, on the contrary, we find explanations in that gufa. We find a chazal explanation how these mitzvahs, these chukim, are not the commandment of seichel. Some are against seichel. So there is explanation in seichel why they're against seichel. So we are using our seichel. It doesn't say don't use your seichel. The person has to work on his seichel, that the seichel should not think. And what's pshat thing? It says a losh, a person, whoever is maharer acharabi, thinks about outside, means challenges his Rebbe. The losh maharer is like his maharer after the shechina. So what does the word maharer mean? Maharer means thinking that there's something lacking there. So by the chukim, you not only trachten ados achesorin in chukim gab mitzvah sichis. Don't be maharer means don't think there's something lacking here. What's lacking here? You're not using your seichel here, so you're lacking. No, don't be mahader, because you're not lacking your seichel. When are you lacking your seichel? When your seichel is fighting it, so you have to fight it. But in this case, if you're in the level of chukim, you're not fighting your seichel. You're not fighting anything. This is your mitzvah. This is the fact. And as I said before, sitracht sich nicht, that latchila doesn't think, and it's not even in your domain. Certainly not to be mahader, to challenge it and say, well, my seichel doesn't accept it. Then it means that you're a mitzvah for yourself. You're not a mitzvah for yourself. There's no question in your mind to begin with. That's why it doesn't use the word don't think or don't be maharer. It says you have no reshus to be maharer. It's not in that domain that you have. The adarabbe, chukah is from loshen chakika, and the contrary, chukah is from the word of chakika, which is carving. When der bittel zum Eibischen hat der gerecht, As I said, by even naif for chakika, when the yid becomes bottled to the Eibush, then he reaches such a level that it's in a way of chakika, which means in the Torah, kein zachu yisrael elokus. There's nothing besides godliness. Just like the carved out letters, which is part of the stone, the precious stone in which it's carved out. So when that happens, is the mitzvah sa'odim, like seichel emidah. So the mitzvah is what a person, what a person is, which is his seichel, his intellect, and his emotions, can still need to sein bittul. It's not a contradiction to bittul. Usually we think bittul is a contradiction to your seichel, to your mitzvah, because the mitzvah of a person is seichel. If you're mevatel and you go beyond seichel, you're, so to speak, fighting your mitzvah. He says, no, it's no fighting. But das geworden legamre uis eigene mitzvahs, because whatever the mitzvahs are, whenever you're involved in avodas Hashem, that is your mitzvah. It's not your own mitzvahs, nor the mitzvahs from the lakus. It's the mitzvahs of David. So you're not shayla, not saying with seichel. That's only when you have seichel and you're a mitzvahs. But if you're not mitzvahs, there's nothing fighting you. This is what happens, almost like saying automatically. This will explain something else. The connection from the meaning of most of the Sedre, the Schara mitzvahs, which talks about the reward of mitzvahs and the punishment. So Shema Sedre Bechukosai, to the name of the Bechukosai. We said in the beginning that the name of a Sedre represents everything that's in the Sedre. Here we have a Sedre called Bechukosai. In Bechukosai, it talks about the reward of mitzvahs, or chas v'sholom, the punishment for not keeping the mitzvahs. What's the connection to Bechukosai? It's strange. The Rinja for Chukim, if you learn Bechukosai, simple pshat, is, what does that mean? We do it because they are Hashem's commandment. Even though we don't we don't know the reason. We don't know what we're going to gain by doing. It makes no sense. Nevertheless, we do it. So if that's what Bechukosai means, Chukim, how does the beginning and most of the Seder fit, which is the Yehudim for Schara mitzvahs, which is the promises of the reward for mitzvahs. Well, and the opposite, the Einshim of Heder Kiyuman and the punishment for not keeping it. Was Azirus of Kiyuma mitzvahs, which is pushing you to do mitzvahs, it's going to receive reward. When does a person care about reward? If he cares about himself. So he really does the mitzvahs, he doesn't know what he's going to get, and it makes no sense, and he's not going to get anything. Never, we tell him, do it. If you do it, you'll get something. Oh, but that's not what you're bottle. But when you do chukim, then you don't care about what happens, because you're mavatal yourself. So then what's Bechukosai have to do with the reward and the punishment of the parsha? Is the beer and the explanation, the Shas Aidas bottle to maybe Leifen for Chakika, for Aidas bottle to Hashem in the form of Chakika, that it's like carved out. As in talking Zachu Yisrael Lakus, by him there is nothing besides the Lakus. The Aces Chakika is an atil from the Meventiv, like the carved out letters, which is part of the stone. Dan is Eitas Chara Mitzvahs and Chakika. So then when you get reward, it's also not something that you, as your mitzvahs, as your ego, oh, I'm going to get schar, oh, that's why I'm going to do the mitzvahs. No, it's part of the chikah. What does that mean? Those was mitzvahs bringing mitzvah schar. The fact that mitzvahs bring along reward, schafft nicht by mention a gefühl von tona mitzvah zu lebzich und sein schar v'tieles. This will not, if a person is a level of complete bittul, so the fact that you get reward is not something that's going to cause to him to do the mitzvah because of himself. Oh, my reward will be, I will gain something. I will have to doing these mitzvahs good, physical good, spiritual good. If you're in a high level, a complete bottle, in the reward itself, you see how godliness is good. Not because I'm going to gain. How does it show godliness is good? That you know why you get reward, you get such great things. Because the Eibishter is good. Bring is eine mitzvahs, good skyt. So therefore, the mitzvahs of Hashem bring good in everything. We stay gashmik shuta, bring good, keep shuta, physical good. So this point, this is what it means. It means a person looks at the schar, not that the schar is going to push him to do mitzvahs. If you're in the level of Bechukosai, you look even at the schar as part of what they beshter. So that's the reason the Rebbe in a different sikh, see in order 52, the Rebbe brings from a different sikh, where there he explains that what's the purpose of Hashem giving us physical reward for doing mitzvahs. Mitzvahs is so great. Get physical reward. You'll have a lot of food. What does that mean? So the Rambam explains one thing, that it's not the reward. All these things are only telling a Yid, if you behave properly, I'm going to give you everything good physically, so you will be able to continue doing more mitzvahs. Because if you get sick and you don't have money, you won't be able to do. So it's not the reward for the mitzvah. But here the Rebbe says it is, and that's what the Rebbe explained. That's in the other Sikha Bariches, that the pshat is that if mitzvahs are good and they're from the Eibishter and it's mitzvahs of the Eibishter, it comes along with everything good. That's automatic. It's an expression of everything good. So a person is bottled to the Eibishter in the level of Bechukosai. That's how he sees. So Bechukosai and the reward of mitzvahs go together. That because you're so bottled, you see the reward. That's only an expression of the Eibishter. The Eibishter's good sky, the Eibishter goodness, which is the mitzvahs, brings goodness. Goodness Gashmi, goodness Ruchni brings all these things. And that's the way a person is supposed to look at all the physical reward that the person gets.